Alright, so this is a story from Vox. There are no good choices. In shifting much responsibility to the individual people, the American government has revealed the limits of individualism, written by Erza Kine. Now, one of the biggest issues I've already got with this is I can tell that the person doesn't understand what individualism absolutely means. Because we do not live in an individualist system, we live in a populist system, which is still a collectivist system, and eh. But he begins to say, where he lives he is choking, Wednesday is the worst, the day was dark, burnt haze, red as the end of the world, my dogs paced and barked, and the animal in him panicked. In other words, this is one of those California sock types. I refuse to call them liberals because they're not really liberals. But this is one of those California types. You see, California is currently on fire, and I have this weird feeling, actually, I've already read the story, where they blame individuality and safe choices for everything in California still being closed, and for the wildfires in California, but we may have to continue looking into this. This is the era of no good choices. Take schooling, for example. Keeping children home robs them of education and socialization. It scars their futures, it stills their joys. It makes it impossible for parents to work or even to rest, but sending them to school endangers their health and that of their teachers and family. The argument is so heated because the choices are all bad, but at least by the standards of the lives we used to lead. The battle like this is a good answer. Like, will we discover one side is right and the other is wrong? But will we? But we won't. There is no answer. Whatever we pick, it'll be horrible. And into that regard, I actually do agree. We do need to start working towards reopening schools for children and finding ways of safely socializing. I don't believe the coronavirus is as bad as everybody makes it out to be. I know it is bad if you have a compromised immune system, because I've had the coronavirus and I have a compromised immune system. I nearly died of a secondary infection, not the coronavirus itself. However, every doctor I saw was too busy jumping up and down, going, "You have the coronavirus, that's what's wrong with you. Here's a bunch of antibiotics, and we have to let the virus run its course." Meanwhile, I was dying of a separate lung infection that destroyed part of my lungs. And this is actually why I thought the CDC 6% thing was a very important statistic, and then immediately got banned from Facebook. So, yeah, the coronavirus thing is just a headache and a half. And I'm pretty sure you too. We're spreading misinformation. It's a headache and a half. Everything else, or everything is like that right now. Do you visit your parents? Do you let them see your grandchild? How do you weigh the risk of contagious against the risk of isolation? If they're sick, does that make visiting them more dangerous or more necessary? How about your friends? What is the cost of your child growing up without community? What is and I mean, as what about your friends? What child growing up without community, without hands to take care of them, allowing them to hug you? And this is another one of those. Well, I'm going to ask a whole bunch of questions and ultimately say that there is no good answer. Again, I can agree with this. At this point in time, there is no good answers. And it's not just because of a contagious outbreak. It's just not a good thing. In my state, for example, it is 3 days in jail and a $500 fine to be walking around without a mask. However, that was found to be against my state's constitution, as well as the US Constitution. So, yeah, it seems to be a little bit weird, but he further goes into saying, or I assume it's a he. I'm not sure if Ezra is a boy's or a girl's name. I'm sorry, dude who wrote this particular piece. That our identical conflicts are often understood as tension between individual freedoms and collective actions. Actually, no. Our ideological conflicts are often a little bit more complex than that. Because there are individualists who are on the left side of the spectrum, as well as collectivists on the right side of the spectrum. Just like the truth between left and right isn't socialism v capitalism, but rather how regulations and things are implemented. Yeah, it's one of those weird things. The failure of our pandemic response policy exposes the falseness of that frame. The absence of effective state action, we as individuals find ourselves in periods of risk, every moment stalked by the disease. See, that's something I really have a problem with. You're already going, well, the Fed should have done more. The Fed did a lot. The Fed's still doing a lot for something that isn't a disease. It is not a disease, it is a virus. There is a massive difference in definition there. However, you also go to say YouTube conspiracies and social media shaming are becoming ourselves. But at the same time, you're complaining about the individual control. The thing is, the United States is not set up for all this stuff to be pushed off onto the Fed. It never was. That is why a lot of our fucking policies, excuse my language, I've been trying not to cuss, but a lot of our policies are failing is because at the federal level, we are a union of separate individual nations, which confuses people, honestly. But that's the truth of the matter is we are a union of separate individual nations, more or less. And having the control of different states actually stems. For example, the outbreak in Alabama was a little weird. We weren't affected as bad as like New York and California because large swaths of my state, you have to drive for a while to do anything. And closing down businesses actually hurts a lot more than it would in certain other areas. Some of the worst decision making was sending elderly people to, believe it or not, are sending infected people into nursing homes instead of the largely empty hospitals in New York, or using this as a political measure as they have been in California and several other states. The burden of decision making and risk in this pandemic has fully transitioned from the top down to the individual, says Dr. Julius Marcus, a Harvard academician. It started with responsible being transitioned to the states, which then transitioned to the local school districts. We're talking about schools for the moment. And then down to the individual. You can see it in the way that people talk about personal responsibility and the way that we see so much shaming about individual level behavior. You can hear my whole conversation. Yeah, okay, we're talking about, or if we're talking about schools, yeah, a lot of things have shifted now to individual responsibility, and it is your responsibility as an individual to take care of your community. You do have a burden of responsibility in what the area you live in is like. For example, if I wash my hands, I take showers, I keep myself somewhat respectable and clean because the kind of work I do, the chemicals I'm exposed to, for somebody who is not used to it, can actually cause them a lot of problems. I work in a building full of robotic welders, which means I get covered in weld slag, dust on a daily basis, which makes wearing a mask extremely hard. Just going to say, and that's a state mandate. That's not anything local. That's a state mandate. So the whole idea of this, well, it's down to the person, is kind of a false thing. But yes, a lot of that should be transitioned to the individual. Taking care of yourself, avoiding risk, is something that you should be naturally doing, and I shouldn't have to say I'm a person in power. I should not have to be going, well, don't stick your tongue in the light socket. That's how you get electrocuted. I shouldn't have to do stuff like that. If you were a child, yeah, I could see that. But you're a person. You're an adult. You should be making your own decisions. But in shifting so much responsibility to the individuals, our government has revealed the limits of individual. Oh, so we're finally to the actual point of the story instead of, well, you setting up to bitch about it. And yeah, Israel Klein is a guy. Yay. Think of the coronavirus risk like an equation. Here's a rough version of it. The danger of an act. Transmission risk of the activity times the local presence of COVID-19 divided by your area's ability to control a new outbreak. Oddly enough, and this might be surprising to you, in the small town I live in, I'm the only person that got it, and I live in a house with 5 other people. Individuals can control a small portion of that equation. People can choose safer activities over riskier ones. I literally sleep and go to work, and nobody else where I work that come in contact with me had coronavirus. I actually apparently picked it up off of a gas pump. Believe it or not, I really don't know how I ended up with the coronavirus other than possibly something didn't get cleaned right. It was in passing at a grocery store that I go to once a month. So, yeah, even that doesn't really, that equation makes absolutely no sense. The ability to control an outbreak, I locked myself up in my room for 2 weeks. Um, if I needed something, it was left outside the door. Uh, it was, paper plates. I mean, we controlled every possible way of the infection spreading. And like I said, none of the people I live with and none of my coworkers that had came in direct contact with me actually had the virus. So it's one of those things like I'm not sure it's as bad as a lot of people seem to think it is. Uh, though the language of choice has obscurities that reality leave no economic choice save for work jobs that put them and their families in danger. But the local presence of COVID-19 and the ability of the authorities to track and squash outbreaks are collective functions. They rely on the competent testing infrastructure. They've okay already advocating for universal health insurance. Now, here's one of the things I have with universal health insurance. Could it work? Absolutely. Again, would it work on a federal level? No. No, it actually wouldn't. Not in the United States, not the way we're set up. Because at that point in time, you're talking about a lot of people. You're talking about a huge amount of people in this country that have to be tracked and dealt with, and different states have different needs. For example, I have allergy issues year round. I have lung damage. Well, according to a universal healthcare system, am I more valuable to live than a person that has none of these things and lives in a different state? That's some of the issues there. Like, maybe universal healthcare is a viable option, but I would have to hear more debates and statistics on it. I know the way that I've seen it set up, the way I've seen all of the systems and stuff that have been opposed or proposed in the United States, that doesn't work. Now, do I believe that we need healthcare reform? Absolutely. Because at the moment, a tablet of aspirin at a hospital is $15, and that's on the cheap side. That is to tell you that there is a lot of corruption in the medical industry. Not to mention, the United States actively limits the amount of doctors that are allowed to be trained a year, and even further limits the amount that are allowed to go into practicing medicine rather than the technical side of the medical world. So, yeah, we do need to talk about some healthcare reform, but we do not need to be, oh, well, universal healthcare. Thoughtful reopening policies, strong public health communication, reliable economic support for the displaced, and the social trust. Manage well, however, lower the background risk, meaning more activities safe to consider decision makings individuals face it. But in America, public infrastructure has failed most people in most places. The result is demanding world of risk individuals have begun left to navigate virtually alone. Okay, about that, you're talking about the public infrastructure, but you're meaning the social infrastructure of government. You're meaning the idea that we need people to tell us what to do. And honestly, that is a fallacy. That is a problem. Your community should be able to communicate with each other. Oh, but we don't have social trust. There is a reason you don't have social trust. Your community is not built to be a community anymore. But, I mean, and you're no longer an individual if somebody's telling you what to do. I mean, I make the choice to go to work every day. I make the choice to buy things. I don't have somebody telling me to do this. I've had times where somebody has told me, well, you have to go to work. You have to do that. You have to do this. But at the same time, I make choices every day for myself. I make choices whether or not I feel okay, whether or not I need to go to a doctor, whether or not I should socialize that day. And I believe that a lot of people make these decisions, but what you're advocating for, or at least what it sounds like to me you're advocating for, is we're not doing enough to support, but the virus numbers are going down. A lot of the numbers have been proven to be possibly wrong. And I'm saying possibly wrong because there will be somebody out there, oh, well, that makes, even though there's scientific proof, yeah, no, that's the thing, is there's a lot of people, a lot of medical professionals, a lot of people in the CDC that are even saying that the numbers are probably wrong, that we don't know really what's going on here. However, there seems to be a down curve in virus infections, but at the same time, a stiffening of the actual rule sets and restrictions. It is almost like what you're saying is not what's actually fucking happening. There I go, swearing again. Oh god, this is getting to be longer than I thought it would be, because I have other things to do. The way we get control of fear, which is driven by the sense of uncertainty, we put focus on the control of individuals, because then we can be angry at people. Well, I mean, if you're going to come into a workplace and you're infected by a highly contagious virus, I know you called it a disease, it is a virus. If you're infected by a highly contagious virus and you walk into a workplace, yeah, I'm going to be kind of pissed. I'm not going to lie, I'm going to be angry as hell at you. And like everyone else, I have my views on activities that should be sanctioned and suns. I have to have my lapses, my compromises, and my trade-offs. Well, at least you're human. As the pandemic, those differences sharpen, cutting even into loving bonds. I know my family is being torn apart. My friendships and relationships are fraying over different views of risk and reward. Politics, too, is tipping into a darker, more dangerous place, with President Trump preemptively undermining the election. Oh, well, guys. The great part about this is, well, we've gotten to the part where he's President Trump blaming. How'd I guess that this was going to go from, well, this is a political hit piece on Trump because COVID. Yeah, you know, believe it or not, I don't have to read the rest of this to tell you that it is basically boo hoo, President Trump. President Trump done the bad things that made me cry. But the closest thing the GOP has to an actual policy to suppress the virus was articulated by Vice President Mike Pence at the Republican National Convention. America is a nation of miracles, he said, and I'm proud to report that we are on track to be the world's first safe, effective coronavirus vaccine by the end of the year. But even if that's true, it's a big if, and does not mean the crisis will end, or that our former lives will resume this fall. Remind you that the infection rate, the death rate, all these rates are falling except for the recovery rate. But my narrative, yeah. He goes on to say that even if the vaccination were to come this fall, it would take us a year to get the number of doses needed to vaccinate the population. Which I also call bullshit on because have you not seen that we made a shit ton of N95 masks fairly quickly? A bunch of ventilators that weren't fucking used. Again, with swearing. God, I'm getting bad about this. And then it's imagine if Joe Biden wins this November and the Democrats also take the Senate. What options will be open to him? A nation that follows lockdown, if one were needed. Disappointed Trump voters would renew on pushing, or would heed a renewed push on masking, or would they simply feed the pure phantasmagoria of QAnon? We are prepared socially and physically for a vaccine that fails or even disappoints. Well, even enough of us. And here's the even better part about this: he's an anti-vaxxer now. You know, I thought lefties were all pro-vax, but apparently, if Donald Trump says something or a Republican says something about a vaccine, it's bad. The fuck's wrong with that? I don't know. It just seems bad. We are set up to fail in a way that, at some level, help. Okay, I can't read any more of this because I have spent a little over 23 minutes going through this, ranting about different sections, and I have came up with this one conclusion. This guy is off his fucking rocker. This guy is a mental case, like most of the left. And in fact, I feel dumber reading this. I'm not gonna lie. When it comes down to it, uh, we've had the lockdowns, we've had the mandatory masking, we've had a lot of things throughout most of the United States, throughout most of the world. And you want to compare us to places like Canada, Germany, the UK, and Italy, where their numbers actually inflated. But it's funny because you're saying that we would trust each other more if we had more government controls in our lives instead of individualism. And you're actively using this as a way to rail against Donald Trump instead of actually talking about what's going on in the world. See, there are no good choices unless you vote for Biden. That is what I'm actually tired about with this fucking infection. This virus that everybody seems to want to call a disease. It's not. And in fact, like I said, it is actually dying off. It is going away. And in fact, in countries that didn't even lock down, They got over it faster than we did. But that would hurt your narrative of we need more socialization. I absolutely hate Vox because most Vox writers are like this. And yeah, I just can't. I'm done with this. It's terrible.